As you know, this morning hour is a time of teaching, and I'm going to be teaching about an event that's related to the signs of the times. So it's the rebuilding of the temple. We talk about the signs of the times. We're talking about something that the Lord asked us to be aware of. He criticized some of the religious people in his day for knowing how to tell when the weather was coming or that the masters were on, things like this, but did not understand the signs of the times. And what events can we expect before the coming of Christ? Do you know? Do you realize that there are things that God has said will be taking place before Christ comes to rule and to reign? But of course, we're looking for the rapture of the church, an event that will happen imminently. But even before that comes, there will be not signs, because it's a signless event, but there'll be, of course, signs for the final coming of Christ. And by seeing those things, we realize we're getting closer every day. So I'm talking about the rebuilding of the temple. Beverly and I were in Israel in September, witnessed some things there that I've never seen before in my life, and I've been going constantly. We've had 115 trips and still had never seen this. So I want to share some of that with you as what I think is a sign of the times. So, first question is, why do we need a third temple? People talk about the Jews wanting to rebuild the temple, particularly the Israeli Jews. Why would we need a third temple? Well, because we want to fulfill end-time prophecy. It's that simple. God said something's going to happen. We expect it to happen. And we look for things that are happening in the world that prepare for that great event. So here's just a few of them. I know you can't probably read the writing, but I'll tell you that. The Bible reveals the new temple will be rebuilt, and it'll be part of the most significant events of what we call the tribulation period. This period of the time of Daniel's 70th week, a time of 7 years in which God pours out his wrath on earth. Current events that prepare for the rebuilding of the temple are signs of that very signal event and the fulfillment of Bible prophecy getting nearer all the time. The Bible says that the temple will be rebuilt in the first part of Daniel's 70th week. It tells us the sacrificial system will be renewed. It tells us the Antichrist will invade the temple at the midpoint and desecrate it with the abomination of desolation. It tells us that Christ will return to Jerusalem at his second advent. His feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is on the east of Jerusalem. And that mountain will split, and it will go right through that area where the Temple Mount is in order to give rescue to Jews who are being persecuted by the armies at that time. And then Christ will purify and rebuild the temple, and it'll be the place where he will rule and reign in his millennial kingdom. So these are all important events the Scripture talks about, and they all involve the temple. So when we look at the Temple Mount, and this is the way it looked in ancient days, and somewhat what it'll look like in the future. The Temple Mount is at the center of God's purpose for Israel and the world. The nations attack it because it represents God's plan for his people. Yeah, I have my Israel pin on this morning. I wear it proudly. People don't like that. We have an increasing, probably the highest rate ever, anti-Semitism, not just in our country, but around the world. And because people do not understand. But at heart, anti-Semitism is simply Satan trying to somehow derail, postpone the events of Christ's coming, because when that comes, he's going to be bound, and ultimately he'll be thrown into the lake of fire. So he is doing everything he can. And since he can't get directly to God, he gets it at the people of God, indirectly. And that's why the Jewish people, despite their unbelief and the fact that they're being disciplined by God, are still at the center of an attack by Satan and those who don't know better in this world. So this is the place where Messiah will one day reign. If you look at a chart, well, you can see that, but you can see that there was a first temple, a second temple, there'll be a third temple in the future, and then finally the temple of the Messiah's glory. In the center, we have where we are today. This is the point of where a spiritual temple exists. We are that temple. Our bodies are the temple of the Lord. The church corporate is the temple in which the Holy Spirit indwells. So individually and corporately, God's holy place is on earth. But the temple itself, the physical temple, no longer exists. It was destroyed 2,000 years ago But that temple represents the place where Christ will carry out his promises to Israel and to the nations in the future. Remember, he said, my house will be a house of prayer for all peoples. Never has been. It still has to be. So we look for that to happen. But we're talking about, in this message, things happening in the present age. So for us, at this point in history, the Temple Mount represents the most volatile 36 acres on earth. I don't think there's any place that you could walk that wouldn't have more controversy from the past and, of course, thinking toward the future than this place. Here's some headlines. I'll bring a lot of headlines out that I've got, but here's one. Preparations to build the third temple in Jerusalem intensify. Okay, so that started some time ago with what we call the Intifada, the uprisings from the Arabs and Palestinians. When you come as a tourist, and I'll be there in about a week and a half, again standing in this place, you look out from the Mount of Olives over the Kidron Valley, and you see that little building called the Dome of the Rock. That's in the place where the temple once stood. In the future, it'll be a very different picture. There may still be tourists coming, but it will be the temple that is rebuilt. And there's signs of the temple. And what I'm going to do is we'll look at 5 of these signs very quickly. First, there's a new recognition. Since the war began now almost 2 years ago, okay, we're looking at day 525 or 26, something like that. There's been a new recognition. A religious war for the Temple Mount this is all part of that. What happened on October 7th is part of that. What's happening now is part of that. And there's going to be a new response. There has been and there will be further from the Jewish people prayer on the Temple Mount, something it was not possible before is happening now. And then a new revival, a preparation for the Messianic era. We have organizations that have been for some time, but now at an accelerated pace, preparing for actual temple worship with implements and vessels and training priesthood, all of that. And then a new reality, sovereignty over the Temple Mount. Israel has never exerted sovereignty over the Temple Mount since 1967 when they conquered that site. It was always their capital city. It was always their holy place. But from 1,300 years ago, Islam invaded and held that. And so when Israel became a state again and they reclaimed Jerusalem in 67, just to make peace, not to provoke anyone, they went ahead and let the Muslim authorities continue to hold control of that site. But now something's changing. I'll show you what that is. And then a new resolve, a readiness to rebuild, something that we just have not seen before, not just on a religious area, but a secular basis as well. So let's start with a new recognition, the religious war. Everywhere you go, as you look at those in the IDF, as you look at things that are being said, for instance, for the first time, I've seen people out in the field with Torah scrolls or wearing talit to pray. You see rabbis going out there. You see all kind of religious symbolism. So it's not just a war for war's sake. Now they know it's not just survival of the nation, but more than that. It involves now a focus on the temple. As I said, in 1967, Israel returned to the Temple Mount. And when that happened, it was a dramatic day. They had returned to Jerusalem in part and into Israel in 1948. But they didn't control the eastern part of Jerusalem where the Temple Mount was until June 7th, 1967. And on that day, some things happened. There were people who were part of the paratroopers and others who came in who were religious and said, God is doing something extraordinary. This is the first time in almost 2,000 years we've actually come to this site ourselves. Many of the soldiers who were there weren't even born. They were like 18, 19 years old. 19 years earlier, Jordan had occupied that site and they closed it off so the Jews couldn't even come. Now, one of that man I just showed you, he started an organization in 1987 called the Temple Institute. We'll talk more about what that was about, again, rebuilding the temple itself. But it started back in 67. Another man, Gershon Solomon, pictured here, he had the same ambition, and he's now deceased, but he had built cornerstones for the new temple, the first stones for it to be laid, many other things like this, and tried to get the awareness of Israel up by having marches and wearing sackcloth during what we call Tisha B'Av, the annual commemoration of the mourning over the destruction of the temple, carrying models of the temple. But in the year 2000, something called the Al-Aqsa Intifada began. Al-Aqsa is the term Muslims use for the entire 36-acre compound. So everything is Al-Aqsa, okay, and that has some religious significance to them from the Quran, where Muhammad made his night journey. So some say it was to Medina, others say it was to Jerusalem. And because of that, any attempt by Jews, even at the Western Wall over here, to pray. You can see people up above where the Muslims were throwing stones down on them. It became very deadly and dangerous. And that led to people going up, the police in particular, going up to the site where the Muslim mosque was, and they barricading themselves in. This went on and on and on. And in April of 2023, this broke into another riot, another tremendous problem. This is kind of the climax of the Al-Aqsa Intifada. And you could see from some of the reports threats by the Palestinians, particularly Hamas. Hamas said Jews going to the Temple Mount during their holidays to pray, such as we're in right now. This is Passover. Just started the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it was last night with the high Sabbath. And so they would normally go to this place to worship and have prayers to God. He said this is a blatant attack on Islamic status, dragging the entire region in open religious war. So what happened on October 7th was a surprise attack on Israel from Gaza. Hamas came in. Whole families were shot and burned in their cars as they tried to escape coming down this is the major highway. No one escaped. And when I was there in September, I talked to the first responders who were there, who witnessed this, who came to the cars, who saw the people. There was only so much they could do because there were still active shooters all in the area. They went to the Nova Music Festival where young people were having just a music event, and they paraglided in and they came in and just murdered everybody there or took people hostage. Most of the hostages came from here or from the nearby kibbutz called Kibbutz Aza, which is part of Gaza. And so Beverly and I were there just to be able to say firsthand, we've been there. We've talked to the people involved. We even talked to the people in Zaka, which is the organization that cleans up all of the bodies and removes them, who saw everything. And so we wanted to be a witness to say, yeah, I was there. I saw it. It happened. Because we have too many people throughout the world denying this, even in the United Nations. One of the men we talked to went to speak to the United Nations, and there was denial there. Some of them were mocking and even saying, and others said any resistance is justifiable, these kind of things. That's where we are right now in the world. This rabbi, who is the rabbi of the kibbutz that was attacked, he was saying we were wrong. It was a very liberal, secular kibbutz. They were inviting for years and years and years and years, since 2006 when Israel gave Gaza to the Palestinians. They withdrew and they gave it to them, and Hamas was elected as the government. Basically, these people, the Israelis, were inviting them to come work in their houses and to have picnics with them and their children and to, pet their dogs. And it was just like they thought this was community. They thought we're reaching out to these people and they're going to respond in kindness. This is, we're showing them love, they'll show us love. Well, what surprised them was it was not just any people at Hamas that came into their houses. The very people who had worked with them, who had sat down over the picnics and been part of their family, were leading this, led them right to the safe rooms where they were, right where their dogs were, shot the dogs, took the people out of the safe rooms, killed the children, all of this. And the rabbi says, we were wrong. We thought by showing love that people would respond, but these are people and a culture based on hate and based on death, and the result is they don't think of Jews as human. So it's a very different situation. That led to what happened on October 7th. And when the attack happened that very day, and if you look at the things, it's going to happen after, this is an earlier report. It says, Jerusalem is the center of the conflict. Hamas hails this is a victory, and they were claiming that when they attacked on October 7th, they were trying to liberate the Al-Aqsa, this place of Muslim thing. And if you look at all of the Palestinian logos, you'll see the Dome of the Rock right in the center, crossed swords, meaning it has to be defended by jihad, this holy war, all of this. It's all over. You see the signs since this is October 22nd now, last year. You see the signs everywhere holding this up with the Dome of the Rock. Here is one over in Lebanon, and you can see this huge poster along the road with the Dome of the Rock as though this is the goal of this whole conflict. And then even stranger is this picture of paragliders coming into Jerusalem, where the Dome of the Rock is. This is the same type of paragliders that did the massacre on October 7th. So now they said we're going to do the massacre in Jerusalem also. Okay, if you look at the soldiers going out to battle, a lot of them are wearing these patches that show the temple. And the wording says, build it speedily, or build it soon. You can see that. Here's IDF soldier holding it up proudly. He says, so we can rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, which is the word for temple. Out in the field, you can see Torah reading, blowing the shofar. This is just a daily event. This is going on. Silver trumpets that are like what was used in the temple being brought out for that purpose. Here's those patches again. This is again just the picture. I'll show you some more here. Are people wearing them on their helmets? You can even see them here on a shelter for a tank. They're saying this is all about the temple. Okay, the Arabs made it about that. Now we're responding saying yes. It's time now to take it back. It's time to assert sovereignty. It's time to no longer live under this kind of conditions because, and so whatever we think about that politically, it doesn't matter because God says one day this is going to be the reality. And so we see this as one of the steps along the way to that fulfillment. Here on the Temple Mount, you see soldiers praying. Here's a graffiti, pictures from Jerusalem. In Hebrew, it says, build the temple, or the battle in Gaza is the war over the Temple Mount. I mean, this is very out there. The public knows this. And you'll see this kind of thing communicated by the Temple movement, but these are pictures they put on all their websites and their podcast. We can surely go up and take possession of it. We can indeed prevail. That's a statement from the scriptures about it. So this is a new recognition that the time is now. Something has changed in history, and you see Israelis, secular Israelis, not necessarily religious Israelis, doing religious things, having this kind of ambition. Now there's a new response, and the new response is prayer, Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. If you didn't know it, if you went to Jerusalem and you wanted to do a tour of the Temple Mount, you were not allowed to take a Bible. They stopped you. You couldn't wear a t-shirt that had any kind of religious symbolism on it. You could not pray on the site. If you went up and just felt moved by the site where our Lord Jesus taught the last week of his life so aggressively, and where he overturned the money changers' tables, or where he, as a child, was simply dedicated. If any of those things moved you, you could not pray. They would throw you out. This was a very restrictive thing. So Jews, of course, who wanted to pray there, it's the most holy site in all of Judaism, could not go there. At Ramadan, you'd have 300,000 Muslims praying on the site. But interestingly enough, when you look at how they pray, all of them are facing in the direction of Mecca with their backsides to what's called Al-Aqsa, or the Temple Mount, simply because they don't recognize it as their primary site of worship. Okay, only that. Now, we had different changes, things happening. Yehuda Glick was a Temple Mount activist, but he got elected to the government. It was in the Knesset. and he got shot 6 times by Arab, shall we say, reactionaries, but he recovered and came back, and he's been leading or encouraging, shall we say, Jews to go on up to the Temple Mount. And in 1967, there was something called the Status Quo Agreement, which simply said, we'll leave things as they are. But this is a site for all the religions. Anybody can come up here. But the Muslims said from the very beginning, no one but Islam. No non-Muslim is allowed to have any kind of religious expression on this site. Well, now in 2022, you saw Jews starting to go up because of this encouragement. It was a small thing. They went up just to certain areas. But then Ben Gvir, who was at that time the Minister of National Security, he resigned recently, but he was there. He would come and he would lead people up. And this is a government official doing this, leading them up to the Temple Mount. You see some of the news articles simply said Israeli extremists who want to rebuild the temple and the government ministers who back them. So this is because this move from simply being a fringe religious group to being people within the government themselves encouraging this. And headlines like this: half of Jewish Israelis back prayer on the Temple Mount, mostly to prove sovereignty. These are not people who they could consider themselves atheists for that matter. They're no religious, but they realize that in their capital city, at the highest point, you have the place where the ancient temple stood, part of their history, part of their heritage, and they're forbidden to even go there. I can't stand, not with people attacking and doing what they did on October 7th. For Israelis, that is another Holocaust. It's never happened. I mean, there's no way to imagine this. If some outside force came into Tampa and went from house to house and slaughtered entire families, wouldn't you expect a different opinion about them, a different response? And that's what's happening. So look here. There are 50,000 Jews ascended for prayer during what we call Sukkot, the time of the Feast of Tabernacles last year. Here's Yehuda Glick with some on the corner over here, if you see him in the corner. And for the first time, they started having regular morning prayers, something that has never been done, led by rabbis at the site. If you look here, you see all these people dressed in black up there, which are Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews. You see a person dressed as a priest here with this is the sheen, the idea of when you praise El Shaddai, the idea of, it was what Mr. Spock did on Star Trek, if you're Trekkies, did that because he's Jewish and they asked him to do something. He just said, well, I was in a synagogue and I was supposed to keep my eyes closed, but the rabbi at the end would do this. So I just did that. But it's really the letter Sheen in Hebrew. It's being talked about. Look at some of these pictures. You see in the ancient days, people would prostrate themselves in the presence of the temple, and now you can see the same thing is happening all over again. I took a lot of pictures of these because I wanted to be able to show you what's actually happening. Here's more. Everywhere you go, this is happening every day. I guarantee if you've been on a tour to Israel and you went to the temple, you never saw this. This is all brand new stuff. And Gvir said, this is policy. It's my policy that we do this. The chief rabbinate said they're permitting ascent to the Temple Mount, which is something they have always said is not possible because we don't know where the Holy of Holies is. We might inadvertently tread on it and desecrate the site. No, they say go. So we've seen a new recognition and a new response. Now we have a new reality, the idea of Temple Mount sovereignty. Okay, have you ever been to the Temple Mount and seen anything like this with people with Israeli flags? And I mean, it just wouldn't happen. This would have been a riot. No longer. So the Western Wall before 1967 was cut off to the Jewish people. There was only a small section where they could pray. Behind them, their houses were built. In 67, that changed. The Temple Mount came into the hands of the Jewish people. And Madi Gur, who's the general here, said the Temple Mount is in our hands. And indeed, that happened. And I think Israelis, particularly these young Israelis who had never been there in their lives, it was cut off, access for them was cut off before they were born. They got there. And they thought they'd be there forever. Rabbi Shlomo Goren was the head of the Israel Defense Forces chaplaincy. He blew a shofar and said the Messianic era is beginning now. Okay, we are here, never going to leave. He went into the Dome of the Rock and he told a lot of people, privately I think, but he said we need to blow this place up and build our temple now. We have it. Well, of course, some would say cooler minds prevailed, but he was censured, and other people said, we can't do that. Moshe Dayan said, you'll provoke the whole of the Islamic world if that happens. We just need to get along with these folks, and that's why things work. I met with him back in '93. He told me all these stories about things. It was still his desire at that point to see the temple rebuilt. He died shortly after our interview. Now, the Temple Mount, you could see, one of the things that Shlomo Goren did was indicate where you could walk without inadvertently treading the place of the Holy of Holies. So that purple square is where they would place the temple. So you could walk anywhere around there and not have a problem. And that's exactly what happened. As I said, Moshe Dayan returned this to the Muslim authorities. They were as surprised as anybody. But he said, look, we have sovereignty over the site. We can do what we want to, so we can let them do what they want to. And his reasons were, it was a danger to the state of Israel. We just barely got by in '67. People would come in mass and try to destroy it if we did this. It was a demonstration to the Arab world that we're not like them. Okay? In the Holocaust and other things, we were mistreated by the victors. We're now the victors, but we're not going to act the same way and mistreat them. We'll share this site with them. Then he said there's an announcement of the international community. Everybody was saying, I don't care. In every other war in history, if you won, you got the property that you won. Not so with the Jews. This was all disputed territory. This was occupied territory. There's always something else. And so the international community said, we don't even recognize that you have taken Jerusalem. Shortly after this, in the 70s, we lived there. Our second daughter was born in Jerusalem. I went to the American, there's no embassy there, it was just the consulate. And tried to get her, we got her birth certificate, so we wanted to get her, passport for the United States. And they put for country of birth, Jerusalem. And I said, Jerusalem's not a country. I said, she was born in Israel. We don't recognize Jerusalem as being part of Israel. That was the American view then. Things have changed since then. And then the decree of the chief rabbin at that time was that no Jew can walk on that site. We'll stay at the western wall below. And so that seemed to be just fine. So Muslims above, Jews below. Problem was the Muslims didn't respect any of that. They considered the Wailing Wall where Muhammad tethered his celestial steed when he made its night journey, and called it the Al-Burak Wall, which is the name of the horse. And so every place that Jews claim had some kind of sanctity or importance to them historically, they said no, it has nothing to do with that. In fact, they came up with the idea that the Jews never had a temple there at all. It was all a fiction. So, as Ben Gvir said in response, Al-Aqsa belongs only to Israel, not to the Muslims. Muslims say Al-Aqsa is only for the Muslims. So you see the conflict continues. I did a little thing, we now have AIs that will produce artwork for you. So I said, well, I'd like to have some artwork of Jesus standing on the Mount of Olives with, the temple in front of him at his return. And this is what I got. Every time I asked them to draw the temple, I got the Dome of the Rock. No matter what I did, I said, here's pictures of the temple, talking about the ancient temple 2,000 years ago. It's all over. I mean, the pictures are everywhere. Every single time, the AI gave me that. Okay, I can never get the Jewish temple there, which means, that stuff's not unbiased. Programmers in there doing their thing. That's the way it was. So in this conflict now, as you see marchers, by the way, all the people who do these protests, there's professionals that build the signs and hire them and bring them there and do all of this. but hands off Jerusalem is part of it. Well, this is the Palestinian Authority accused Israel of trying to spark a violent religious war. Israel did the same to them. These are clashes. Netanyahu says Jerusalem and the Temple Mount problem is insoluble, and it pretty much is for men. And here's why it matters we're standing on the Temple Mount. And you had Rabbi Ariel, who is the founder of the Temple Institute, giving tours now there and explaining all these things. And so you have this expression of Jewish nationalism we're talking about that just has not been seen before. People with Israeli flags. You couldn't bring an Israeli flag up there. You couldn't bring a Bible, couldn't bring anything. Here's someone that says returning to the Gaza Strip right in the front of things. And if you look at this is what's phenomenal. It's like you're out on a Sunday stroll, and the people who are here are families, baby strollers, entire families on the Temple Mount. I guarantee you, never has that happened before. This is a new thing, and that's exerting sovereignty. As one woman who's interviewed said, the war we are waging is a war for the Temple Mount. So we've looked at it this far, but now we have a new revival, a preparation for the temple era. All this has been recognition. It's been, a new kind of response. But now we have a preparation. Back in 2006, I believe, the Sanhedrin was reconvened. This is the same Sanhedrin that at our Palm Sunday was responsible for Jesus going to the cross. But it's also the Sanhedrin that controlled all the affairs related to the Temple Mount. This is the building that was built for them. This is where they convene. It's there. It is actually 2004. Sorry, I didn't have it up here, but that was reconvened in 2004. Their goals are to find the site of the original temple, locate a descendant of King David, which they have. There's actually every year a whole convention in Jerusalem of descendants of King David, which were traced through the family of Hillel. So temple records were lost, but not in terms of individuals. And to eventually erect an altar on the Temple Mount, which will begin the sacrificial system. They're preparing temple vessels. They say they're ready for the rebuilding of the third temple. If you look at what the Temple Institute has done, you have the things for the high priest, you've got the candelabra, you've got the table of showbread, you've got all these things that are there. You've got just every art. Used to be these were in preparation. Now it's all been finished for years. So everything is ready to go when there's a temple. But they had to train priests. The Kohanim, the priests, the Levim, the Levites had to be trained for this. So for years now, you've had priests leading worship. Not on the Temple Mount because they can't be there, but they've been doing this. They've learned the whole laws of the temple and how to do things. You have people practicing this all the time. Here's the table of showbread, working with that. The altar, the sacrificial altar. And it's a portable altar. They can take it from place to place. You have women who have learned the art of weaving for the temple. The curtains and things in the temple had to be specially woven. They've done this. You've had Jews revive at different times, different rituals near the Temple Mount, all sacrificial things. Here's one, animal sacrifices. As we come to the end, I'll tell you this is something that's happening now, and has been a fear that Passover, they'll do this as well and provoke an even greater problem. So we don't know. It's just now the season. You can see reenacting here a Passover reenactment, but not on the Temple Mount because they can't get there, but now they can. So different things. Here's first fruits. And then the Levites, people like Don over here who can sing and can play. There's a whole school for the Levites, and they have all kind of concerts regularly. They're Levitical choir to do these things, and there's special things related to temple worship. And then, what you may have heard in the news, the red heifer. Okay, this is made popular, at least on the internet. If you kind of surf that, you'll find some of it. The red heifer in the third temple. Here's a lot of articles about it. Holy cow, can one red heifer herald the third temple and the end of the world as we know it? Or holy war, red cows, Gaza, the end of the world. Or red heifers arrive in Israel. Is it a signal of the third temple, the end times? Or scared of a baby cow, Palestinians say Israel is planning to build the third temple, destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Or the first red heifer in 2,000 years fulfills Bible prophecy and signals end of days. You might have seen one of these type of news reports. Well, the red heifers, according to Maimonides from the medieval period, is speaking about what we find in Numbers chapter 19. Kind of idiomatic statement that a red heifer, pure red heifer, has to be offered, but not as a sacrifice. It's burned, its ashes are then necessary for purification of all those vessels that would be used, purification of the priest who will be involved with that. Even those who would build the temple need to be purified with ashes. So this is kind of the first step. You got to have this if you're going to go forward. And they say, according to Maimonides, he says, 9 red heifers were prepared from the time that this commandment was given, that is by Moses, until the destruction of the second temple in the year AD 70. He says, from that time, there were 9 red heifers. The 10th will be that of the King Messiah. He'll prepare it, and it may be speedily revealed. So they believe that with this red heifer, finding it, bringing it to Israel, and actually doing the ceremony and having the ashes, they're at that place, the place when Messiah will come. So it took a while. These red heifers were brought by evangelical Christians from Texas, and so they're now in Shiloh. That's where they're being kept, having a good time, you know, the fatted cow. This is one of the sisters. I was speaking at a church in Waxahachie, Texas, a few weeks ago, and the pastor said, well, I got one of those red heifers. I got 2 of them that came from genetics from the same family. These were taken to Israel. These were left behind. And so I said, well, I got to go see those. So went out and fed me a red heifer. Okay, so they have no idea that they're sisters and brothers, or, well, I guess they're all sisters, aren't they? They're heifers. Anyway, here you see it, everything is ready for the third temple, since red heifers were brought to Israel last year. And here's the Hamas spokesman revealing we attacked after the Jews imported red heifers. So again, connected with the rebuilding of the temple, all of this type of thing. Hamas reveals the hidden reason on October 7th for its attacks. And again, the attempt to have these ashes, which leads to the ability to rebuild the temple, which of course involves something out there solving the political issue too. But that's what may happen. So let's look at this. A new resolve, build the temple soon. And this brings us to the last of this. In the Mishnah, one of the Jewish books outside the Bible that is sort of a commentary on the Bible, it says, each generation that does not rebuild the holy temple, it is as if that generation destroyed it. If you have the ability to do it and you don't do it, you are culpable for not doing it. That's the way they think. And so many generations, it's not been possible, but now it seems to be. So you see these things, rebuild the temple today. Israel must end the status quo on the Temple Mount now. This is all imagery they presented, so I copied it from them. You know, the idea of rebuilding the temple. The blueprints exist. They have existed for some time. How do you build a temple with modern electricity and all the things? Well, they've figured it all out. They've got it ready. You see models of what they want to do out there. And here is Minigavir. These are the days of the third temple. Israelis who take rebuilding the temple very seriously. This is what we're seeing. Israelis call for rebuilding of the temple and returning to animal sacrifices. So have you heard, and we've heard rumors, you've heard echoes, you've heard things of this, but you've never heard the kind of thing we're hearing today in a very strong and regular way. And then we have our president, which they think is going to be a key to this. Pete Hegseth, when he was in Fox News, of course, interviewed Trump, and now he's our Secretary of Defense. And he called at one time for the rebuilding of the temple, back when he was simply a reporter. But he's also gone, and this is the head of the Temple Institute, standing there with thumbs up, So what that means, don't know, but there's certainly a world out there that looks at that and is worried. So the question is, will this current war result in occupying the Temple Mount as a first step toward rebuilding the temple? Could happen. Jews are looking forward to the day after, when they defeat the enemies. And by the way, Gaza and Hamas is one thing, but it's the shared sentiment, the same ideology, the same actions are held by Palestinians everywhere, because after all, Hamas is their elected government, their authority. You always have individuals who may not feel that way. For the most part, collectively, this is a problem, and you can't do away with it. And if these people control the Temple Mount, they can no longer control the Temple Mount. If you're thinking, as an Israeli that says, I don't want a repeat of what we've seen, we've got to change things. You can see on the helmet the insignia here. Here are people who say, we've set aside the Jewish temple and the Al-Aqsa. We're preparing full swing. Have you ever I don't know if you saw these signs, but Trump, make Israel great again. This is the appeal over there. In his first term, when he was first elected, they thought he would be involved with facilitating the third temple. They even put out a coin like this. They called him a modern-day Cyrus. They had Cyrus, who was the first one to send Jews back and finance the rebuilding of the temple back in the year 538 BC. But Trump is the one that got the embassy open in Jerusalem. Trump is the one now who is with Netanyahu as of last week, spearheading, whatever we're going to do with Iran in order to prevent further conflict in the Middle East. You just have to get to the head of the snake, as they say. So we don't know where it goes from here, but we know what people are thinking. So what could the end of the war hold for Jerusalem and the Temple Mount? Well, here's some ideas. Well, Israel decide that peace is only possible if Jerusalem and the Temple Mount is under Israeli control. It seems a radical prospect, but nothing has shaken Israel in the last 75 years like the new Holocaust they experienced from their Palestinian neighbors, who continued to praise October 7th and called for Israel's destruction based on its occupation of the Temple Mount. And then if you link October 7th massacre and the cause of the war, that justifies asserting Jewish sovereignty over the Temple Mount. Otherwise, the same terrorists will oppose Israel within its capital city. Or now that the status quo on the Temple Mount has ended, and it has effectively when the Muslims built another mosque up there, but also when Jews went to pray up there. All that means a new day. Israel may secure Judaism's holiest site to maintain its security against countries that seek to invade Jerusalem to control it. That is, countries like Iran or Turkey, both of whom say that the Temple Mount is theirs. There is now no reason to fear Islamic provocation. The reason since 67, Jews have been banned from the Temple Mount. Israel may ban Muslims from the Al-Aqsa Mosque as they ban Jews. We don't know. And could such plans be a catalyst for a greater Arab invasion of the city of Jerusalem, as described in the War of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 39, which the scriptures say one day Russia will lead an attack. And everything is in place. You can see Erdogan saying we want to protect the Al-Aqsa, or saying we must take a physical stance and here's the Iranians depicting a Muslim invasion of Jerusalem itself. And Erdogan, with his geopolitical objectives, particularly in Syria right now, all of this. He says the world must unite against Israel. So we see all this, and they've staged a mock Iranian siege of the Temple Mount. Look at this kind of stuff. This is what's happening out there. You may not be aware of it, but it's just moving us in the direction of the fulfillment of prophecy, with this alliance between Russia, the Gog, and Iran, Persia, and Turkey, many of the other countries mentioned as the leaders of this invasion. Hamas fears sacrifices the Temple Mount. This is just from April 8th. They believe with this Passover, something may happen. There were men arrested plotting an attack on the Temple Mount. wasn't because of that. But the stage is now set for the end-time war against Israel. And because of this, we need to be aware of this. Like the men of Issachar, they were aware of the times and they knew how to act. And so for us, it's a matter of prayer, maybe as far as we can go, but to realize that this is an important time. But for us as believers and the church, we don't need to look so much at the signs of the times. Our focus needs to be not on what is coming, but on who is coming. Because ultimately, all this, what is prophecy? It's all about the Lord Jesus. He's the one who's coming, and he may be coming very soon. So this is our call to all who can hear to be aware of what's happening to the world, to prepare our own hearts for this day. All right, well, let's just pray quickly. Father, thank you for this time in which we've looked at some of the current events and how the things that are happening now, preparing for all the things you promised for tomorrow. May all of our hearts be looking for you. You are what it's all about. And all these things only direct our thoughts and our prayers to say, even so, come, Lord Jesus. And we thank you in his name. Amen.